Thank you. Good morning, everybody. This morning we're going to start off the annual budget presentation with Mr. Paul Payne, and he'll give us an overview before we meet from the members of the Board of E&A. Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have some handouts for you. Yeah, it's all the same.
Thank you. Let's get the sun.
All right, I'm just handing out a presentation on the sort of highlights of the budget, and starting with that presentation on page 2. The annual operating plan this year is, as proposed for FY 2016, total is $1,016 million, an increase of 1% over the previous fiscal year. If you look at the chart below, it shows that those general categories by fund. The general fund at $492.6 million is up 1.7%. Special revenue categories totaling $126 million are up 2.2%. Most of those special revenue categories includes parks funds, public safety sales tax funds, the gaming funds, things like that. The grant funds, $58.8 million, are down 3%. Most of that is in the asset forfeiture category. If you'll note in the police department's budget, there was a one-time increase last year, but this year it's a reduced amount. In the debt service fund categories of $4.8 million, that's a 30% decrease. That's because in the current fiscal year, we prepaid some debt. There was a defeasance that actually paid off some of our outstanding GO, so which is unusual. But this is the normal rate of payment in the proposed for FY16. So that would be a decline in that budget amount. In the capital improvements funds, the total amount is $43.8 million. That's a 13.2% increase. Most of that increase is related to the fact that the sales tax results this year are actually healthy. And so what we're doing is not only that increases your sales tax base, but it also allows you to appropriate balances that have accrued in the current fiscal year. Enterprise fund categories slightly down at 225.5%, at $225.5 million. That's a decline of 1.7%. The water division is down about $1.2 million, and the airport's down about $2.8 million. In the internal service fund category, that's $64.8 million, a 3.7% increase. Most of that is, the internal service funds consist of mostly the funds that are charged between funds, the employee benefit funds, as well as the internal service fund for the gasoline account. And as you can see, the general fund budget is about 48%, or just under half of the total overall budget. Going to page 3, it's sort of a highlight of some of our major revenue sources. Actually, this year, the major revenue sources have actually done pretty well. Both the earnings tax year-to-date was up 5.1%, the payroll tax 5.8%, and the sales tax year-to-date 11.5%. Now, some of this is a little uncharacteristic, particularly with the sales tax, where our 10-year growth rate is about 1% to 2.5%. So you'll see when we talk later about revenues, scaling that back in terms of estimates, because we had the one-time surge there. But those are good results on our major revenue sources. This is being offset in a little bit by the fact that the franchise revenue taxes, which are utility taxes, as well as some of our departmental receipts, were down for the year. So that sort of dragged down the overall performance. But major tax revenue was doing well this year. Moving to page 4, this is sort of an illustration I use every year to say what is our just sort of underlying gap when you approach the budget. For those that have been with Ways and Means or for a number of years, or going back to when we had the recession, if you remember this initial gap, sometimes you see $40 million. I mean, if you remember. So what I've got here is an illustration which shows a gap of about $6.2 million, which is a little bit modest by recent standards. If you take the FY15 general fund revenue base of $484.4 million, we are estimating that the revenues will exceed that in this year by about $3 million. And then you add some net growth of 1.1%, that gets you $5.2 million for a total of $492.6 million. Apply that to your general fund budget base, this year's budget, 44.4, and then some of the known increases and decreases. The capital reallocations, which we had done in the previous year, that was $2.5 million. Other fund reallocations regarding the use tax and other, that was about 3.4. We don't presume that going in. We just lay that out as assuming that it won't happen, then we see where we end up when we're at the end of the process. Lease debt, we had some civil courts lease was expiring, so we had something, some good things happen there where some existing debt was expiring, so we could actually have a reduction. Police and police pension, there were the pay increases that we had to accommodate within the police department. We did offset a little bit by improved pension performance, would reduce that cost a little bit. Other employee pay and benefits, again, the merit pay increase that we had this year, the health insurance increase, and then again, also a slight reduction in the pension costs. Workers' compensation costs, if you remember, we distributed those to departments. I think this year we targeted a 15% reduction, which is probably too aggressive. So we're still keeping those distributed among the departments, but we're estimating or we're targeting a 5% reduction in cost. In the election board, we had no regular scheduled elections, so you would see a larger decrease, but we do have two special elections budgeted. One is a potential for the bond issue, which would be August, and the other, which would be for retention of the earnings tax, which would be in the spring. However, that would be assuming that the state also has a March presidential primary scheduled, in which so they would be paying for at least half of that election. Facilities management has seen some utility cost increases. This includes about $600,000 from Forest Park, which, as you know, as a budget measure in recent years, Forest Park Fund has been paying. Well, the end of that agreement ended the current fiscal year, so that's a $600,000 increase there, as well as other increases, just normal utility cost increases. And then increasing in the fleet repair cost. We're seeing that more and more, particularly with the fire department equipment. This is almost directly related to the fact that we have not replaced our equipment. I mean, the delay in replacing our frontline fleet it shows up, and these type of things and we've heard this discussion in the bond issue where your frontline equipment gets older, the cost of repairing it continues to rise, and so we're seeing an increase in that area. The only thing, and one of the few items which went down this past year has been fuel cost, and so we're taking advantage of that. So you add all that in, that gives you a base budget of $498.8, which is about a $6.2 million gap there. Again, modest by recent standards. In order to address that, we've scattered a few budget cuts, about $1.3 million. That includes departments absorbing the costs of their pay increases, initiative workers' comp, and some other miscellaneous cuts. Although we are giving the full allocation of capital, there is still a few revenue reallocations of about $2.8 million. And then we've also got some increases in some of the special revenues, particularly with the sales tax, since it was up this year. The actual ability to appropriate accrued revenue helped out in this situation. So that is there a $6.2 million, basically a summary of how we address the $6.2 million. On page 6, this is an illustration of payroll costs. Of course, we can't address anything in the budget here without addressing payroll, as it's nearly 75% of your total budget. The FY16 budget includes approximately $2.6 million for the full year costs, the 2% merit pay increases on employee anniversary dates, plus the $1.3 million to meet the increase in health insurance. The ERS pension costs for non-uniform employees declined $1.6 million in the general fund. Again, when we're looking in recent years and continuing into this year, we're not allocating something specific for this coming year's pay increases. That represents about 1% of pay. We've found that in past years, most departments can absorb that cost, and so that we are continuing that practice. In the police department, that includes the full year cost of the FY15 and 16 pay matrices, which were increased $1,000 plus their steps, and a wellness incentive, which combined total of $4.2 million. It includes $1.1 million in the increase in health insurance costs and workers' comp. The authorized strength is 1,287, and it's an increase of 5 with the grant. The fire department also receives similar increases with the police. The pay matrices increases at $1,000 plus their steps, and the wellness incentive and health insurance at $1.9 million. Contributions to the two fire pension systems are down $2.1 million in the general fund. The authorized uniform strength remains at 587, which includes 20 that are funded by a SAFER grant, and still requires that 2 doubled-up fire companies be held non-operational. Starting on page 7, these are some of the highlights by department and some of the other changes proposed across the departments. In the general government finance category, personnel department had some fire exams in FY15, which would not be repeated in FY16. That was a one-time cost. However, we do have promotional exams for police department at $195,000 and some recruiting expenses of $150,000. The City Councilor's Police Unit increased 1 attorney position. The Information Systems Services Agency will expand their City Works program. That's a program to provide the field workers with the ability to coordinate through technology the service requests as well as keep track of worker orders. In finance, we're moving the sewer utility costs to facilities management. We felt that when you look at the controller's office, you'll see a line for sewer bills. Well, that has been moved because most of the city utility bills are in facilities management, so we felt that was a better place for that. The controller's office is also reducing its audit staff, and a number of positions have been moved to human services to help them with their grant-funded operations. In the city-wide accounts, that's that category where it's not department-specific. Unemployment comp is down $100,000. The assessor subsidy is up a couple $100,000, and we do have a small amount budgeted for disparity study follow-up at $34,000. Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, there's not much going there other than the recycling program, which is moved from refuse to parks. That's 1 position and some per performance. In judicial offices, you'll see that the jury commissioner's office is combined with the court administrator's office. That's, again, part of their reorganization. Sheriff, no change in positions with some attrition savings. So there's not really many changes in the judicial office category. In county offices, other than the election board costs I discussed earlier, the medical examiner position has some contractual increases of about $100,000. In the streets department, and we do have a traffic engineering position budgeted for the Complete Streets Initiative, about $80,000, and street lighting is also increasing by about $500,000. Salt purchase, however, because we spent a significant amount on this year's salt purchase, we had budgeted the purchase of 20,000 tons, and as you know, from my mid-year review, we had budgeted that at $50 a ton. It came in at $112 a ton, so that was a significant expense in the current fiscal year. But what it also means is that we don't need to spend that much this coming fiscal year on salt, so that's a reduction of $700,000. And again, the recycling program from refuse is, again, as I mentioned earlier, was being moved to Parks Department. Under public safety, other than those discussions I had on the pay increases, the director's budget includes 4 positions for the Civilian Oversight Board, and the building division will add 2 inspector positions for the fire safety unit. And due to the reduced census over the corrections facilities, we do have some reduction in costs for the contractual meals at the corrections. And then the Board of Public Service, other than the increase in utilities and decrease in fuel listed earlier, the facilities increase for the move of the sewer utility costs from the controller's office. So that's a change of about $1.3 million when you go through all that whole list. When it get to the point of special funds, again, as I mentioned, we've got less reliance on reallocation of special revenues. In the half-cent capital sales tax, as you know, we're fully allocating the ward accounts this year. In previous years, we had reallocated 25% of that. But you've received your full allocation. Now, I will mention, when you look at your ward allocations this year, part of it's because you're getting full allocation, but also part of it's because we have a beginning balance, because the sales tax outperformed. So part of that's not going to be recurring, but about $2 million of that is a recurring amount. In the Forest Park Fund, as I mentioned earlier, over the last 5 years or so, the Forest Park Fund had been picking up their own utilities. That was part of their management agreement, which expires at the end of this current fiscal year, so that's $600,000 that the general fund's picking up next year. The drug court subsidy still remains at $312,000 in the crime prevention account of the Public Safety Half Cent. And we still are allocating a portion of the Affordable Housing Fund that's about $500,000 and $2 million in building demo funds from the local use tax. We've made progress in a lot of this reallocation, but it was about too big of a nut to crack to get it all to stop all the reallocations there. If you look below, you'll see some of the special fund revenues. The public safety sales tax had $1.4 million over estimate there, and so that's a higher sales tax base. The excess use tax is $1 million. The assessment fund is $100,000, and the public safety trust fund, that's the graduated business license fund, which was trailing, is about $400,000. So that overall in the special revenue fund category, there was about $2.1 million difference. Moving to page 10 on the general fund revenue outlook. As I mentioned, the earnings tax was up this year, and revised estimate about $161 million. Projected to be 2% next year, it's 164.3. That's a bit of an outperformance for this year. The 2% estimate is closer to its 5-year growth rate of 2.2, and a 10-year of a 2.5. Property tax was up, is estimated at $58.3 million, a 1.5% increase. Actually, the real property was only up less than 1%, at 0.7. This was outperformed by the personal property taxes of 7.2%. Sales tax receipts are estimated at $52.2 million. This is got an estimated decline of 2.6%, and that's simply because of the overall trend this year outperforming in typical numbers. So when you look at that, and you can see when in some of the discussion in the budget documents about sales tax, I consider this year to be an outperforming year. So when you see those years, particularly we went through this back in FY12, where we had a surge in amounts of about 9.5%, and then the following year declined by 5%. So I'm backing the estimate for the sales tax off for next fiscal year simply because of this year did so well. Payroll tax estimated at $38.2 million. That's 1.5% increase. Franchise utility taxes, again, $53.8 million. They actually underperformed this year. We do expect to see some increase in electric utility receipts due to a recent rate increase. And then we've got normal increases related to natural gas. Of course, a lot of this is subject to the weather conditions. Whether it's a severe heat in the summer or cold in the winter, that affects your franchise utility taxes. So we have to always keep an eye on those. Intergovernmental revenues, estimated at $25.1 million. That's down 1.3%. Most of that is simply because this year we had about $425,000 in a Medicaid payment that was released in EMS revenues that would not be recurring. In the license tax category, $15.6 million. That's primarily flat. The biggest chunk of that's going to be your graduated business license. In departmental fees and fines, $50.5 million. Again, it's a 1.3% increase. And the other category, that $34.7 million, a lot of that's transfers from the Convention and Tourism Fund, as well as the Hotel Tax Fund, which are actually tax revenues but that are transferred in. Do not expect an increase in that category. And you can see the earnings tax still remains about 33% of the general fund revenues. Moving to page 11, I'll go through this quickly. I think I've identified most of the highlights in the departmental expenditure area. You can see in general government, the 4.2% increase there is the PFBC contribution, which went up by about $400,000, and the police hiring that was in Department of Personnel that also was up. That's the reason for those increases. In the Department of Finance, that decline of $15.8 million is mostly due to the sewer bill that's moving to facilities management. You can see in the county office category, the decline of 4.1% is mostly due to the election board decrease. The street department's 2.2% decline, mostly related to the salt decrease. And you can see in the Board of Public Service, the increase of 11.5%. That's the sewer bill, the ESD repair, and as well as the utility cost increases. Looking at the pie chart below, you can still see public safety represents 55% of the general fund budget. Moving to page 12, some of the proposed changes in special funds include the local use tax. It's actually down this current fiscal year, about 2.3%. It's tracking at about $30.6 million. The budget is $32.7 million, is nearly flat with an increase of $200,000. That includes an appropriation of an existing fund balance. It continues the reallocation of $500,000 in affordable housing funds, and the total affordable housing budget is $5.1 million as they're utilizing their existing fund balances. Building demo funds remained at the reduced allocation of $1.5 million, and the health department budget is stable at $8.1 million. And the lead and building demo funds, if you remember a few years ago, the lead fund had been in a deficit situation. There was an ordinance passed to address some of that, which gives them additional revenue. So that one is actually in good standing. The lead fund is a positive balance. However, the building demo fund remains in deficit. It's doing a little better as permit activity increases, but its negative balance remains in the $2 million range. Gaming fund revenues are down 5% through the FY15 third quarter. And the FY16 budget of $7.1 million assumes the continued decline, slow decline in gaming revenues, which we've seen over the last number of years. Although you will see that the gaming fund budget is up simply because last year we were making up for a deficit in the fund. So that's sort of contrary to what you expect, but we do expect revenue to continue to decline. The Convention and Tourism Fund retains the funding for the sister cities at $75,000 and Grand Center at $90,000. On page 13, the highlights of the capital fund budget. Again, as I mentioned, it's $43.8 million. It funds the allocation of the half-cent capital to ward and recreation accounts, full allocation of those amounts. And it meets our FY16 obligations, although, as we discussed last week with the bond issue, our longer-term capital funding is still needs to be addressed. If you look at the pie chart there, it shows that existing debt of $19.8 million. That's most of our debt service on things such as the City Justice Center, juvenile detention, Carnahan, the 1520 Market, and some of our outstanding equipment leases. The ward improvements of $9.6 million. That's a $3.1 million increase over the current fiscal year. Major neighborhood parks includes $1.4 million in debt for the Forest Park debt and $1.6 million in that citywide parks debt. And you can just see the rest there. I should mention that other citywide capital, $1.5 million, includes addressing another one of those items that popped up because of capital needs, where there was some HVAC cooling equipment in the Carnahan building, which was about to go on the Fritz. The courts included a $1.8, or actually a $2.3 million item in their budget to address that. Obviously, that would have been a major hit on general revenue, and that was one of the items included in the bond issue again. And so what we did was, through the capital fund, we allocated $800,000 outright, and then included $1 million of that through the energy efficiency grant or issue that will address that. But the reason why I bring that up, it's just another item that pops up. It's going to be popping up in our operating budget due to the delay in addressing some of our longer-term capital needs. Page 14 just sort of highlights the changes in personnel totals overall. General fund, not much of a change. 5,044 positions is up about 5 positions. Of course, you got 4 increase in the Civilian Review Board, one at ITSA, one at the City Councilor's Office. Refuse Division, we eliminated about 5 vacant positions. And so all that nets out to about an increase of 5. Special funds were down about 2. Grant funds were down about 19. Enterprise funds were flat. Page 15, again, that's We've added this illustration each year over the last number of years. This just shows you the trend over the long term. We're still down over 400 positions in the last 10 years. Item 16, pensions. Pension costs totaled in FY16 is $79.6 million. That's a $6.6 million decline over the current fiscal year, and the second year we've had decline in pension costs. Most of this is due to two things. One is the continued reform efforts with the fire pension system, as well as improved performance on the markets of the three pension systems. And going into page 17, it sort of highlights the details for each of the three systems. You can see in the first column for the employee retirement system, it details asset market value of $780.5 million, actuarial value of $738, with liabilities of $912 million, with unfunded liability of $174 million. So that's funded on an actuarial basis of $80 million, or 80.9%. On a market basis of 85.6. And the total cost for contributions as well as debt service of $31.7 million, or about $7,136 per employee. Under the fire retirement system, the old fire retirement system, which is now frozen, is overfunded actually. And now that it's fully funded, it's 103.2% on an actuarial basis. The fire retirement plan is funded at 34.4%. When you add the contributions to the debt service under the fire retirement system the old system requires no contribution in FY16. The new system requires $7.4 million contribution. That adds up to $13.9 million, which is $22,201 per employee. And the police retirement system at $729 million in the market value, $717 million in the actuarial value, for $178 million unfunded liability, 80.1% funded, and 81.4% on a market basis. It's a $34 million cost at $26,594 per employee. So basically what this is telling you is from a funded status, at least 80% or better is good. However, I would also caution that a couple things. One, that it's still high, and two, that we are at the end, the economic cycle we're in is sort of getting long in the tooth. So while you're just meeting that threshold of being well-funded, there's also the risk that when there's a reversal of fortunes, when the next recession hits, you then get pulled below where you want to be. So theoretically, you should be higher than the minimum funded level at that time. So I would think now that we've addressed the fire retirement system, that there are still some items to address on the other two systems. So to recap, on page 18, total budget of $1,016.3 million, 1% increase from the previous fiscal year. General budget is $492.6 million, up 1.7%. And it contains scattered reductions, some increases in revenue reallocations. Total increase of 5 net general fund positions, and a decrease of 16 positions in all funds. And while balanced, we still have longer-term budget challenges. Attaining a structural balance. Primarily, what that means is your recurring revenue equals your recurring expenditures. We're getting closer, and we've been closer each year, but we're not there yet. Continuing to restore our reserves. Currently at unfunded reserve balance, $12.9 million. It's just over 1/2 of our 5% target. Just to give you an idea of where that was a number of years ago, when we had the recession years, we had deficits of $18 million. So that was higher than what we've got in the balance right now. So that's why it's important to try to restore those reserves. Continuing the pension reforms, as I mentioned, police and ERS need some adjustments as well. And then financing of our capital needs, building streets and bridges, hopefully through the bond issue being one of those efforts to address. And that's the conclusion of the presentation. I'll be happy to address any questions you have.
All right. Are there any questions for Paul Payne? Alderman French.
Yes. Let's just go through. On page 3, these numbers are presented as percentages. Do you
Yes.
think you can get that to us in raw numbers?
Sure.
That'd be helpful. And I think in that same vein, let's go back. We'll just take it page by page. Page 4.
Yes.
The police and police pension matrix, so this is, are we looking at a 7.2 million increase?
Yes.
And that's mostly, that's going where to? Police?
Yes, you have you have two things. One is this year's pay increase, which is the matrix plus $1,000, plus they had a fitness, although that's, plus they had a wellness exam. The next year's increase, which is again, the matrix and the $1,000, plus the wellness exam, plus health insurance, and then netting out the pension reduction.
Is that broken down anywhere, that 7.2 million?
You will see, actually, I've got the pension actually pretty well detailed in the back.
So how much of that 7.2 is pension?
Pension actually went down.
Okay, so none of that 7.2 is for pension.
Well, pension actually reduced it. It would have been higher.
So where's the 7.2 million going?
I can break that out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
So I'll request that.
And let me just ask you, so last year we gave them the matrix plus across the board 1,000,
Yes.
and then did we agree to give them across the board 1,000 again this year plus matrix?
Yes.
Oh, that was a 2-year
Yes.
agreement? Okay.
So where did the agreement to just give everybody across the board 1,000 come from?
That's in the agreement with, we're talking about just fire and police. So that's part of their collective bargaining agreement and that was their pay agreement, similar to everyone else's in terms of negotiating, but that's what their agreement calls for.
And how many years do they get that?
I believe it was a 2-year agreement, so next year will be the second year.
Okay, so it's just a flat $1,000 per employee? Okay. Election board, you mentioned the 2 elections coming up, special elections, one for potentially the bond issue.
Right.
And the other one for the earnings tax vote.
Right.
Is this, how often do we do this?
Every 5 years.
5 years now. All right. And that's expected to be on the August or the November
Well,
ballot?
here's the deal. In a normal year, you wouldn't have any, all right, because we wouldn't have had any scheduled elections, so you haven't seen it further. But in looking at election board, we said, okay, well, we know one way or the other there's the possibility of the bond issue election, right? So we said, okay, let's make sure we've got that budgeted. But and when we reauthorized or authorized the first time the earnings tax, that was in April 2011, your 5-year, and you're supposed to reauthorize it every 5 years. So that means in the spring of 2016, we're going to have to authorize it again. Now, it just so happens that the state has a presidential primary in March of 2016. Now, that's a special election that the state would have to pay for. So, in looking at the budget, we were suggesting that, well, if the state's paying for that election, if we piggyback onto that item, or on it, we would share the cost, but it wouldn't be the full cost of an election, so it's sort of a cheaper way of doing it. We have to make sure the law department said that's okay, but that's what we anticipate. So in terms of the special elections, we have one full cost special elections, theoretically the bond issue, which would be August, and then one half cost of an election, which would be theoretically in March.
So why couldn't we do them on the same day?
Well, one, it says every 5 years, and you'd have to check and see what that window of availability would be. But 2, I think the thinking is that when it comes to the earnings tax, you don't want to dilute the importance of that one item. I mean, that's a pretty important item. And I don't know necessarily whether you want to have a ballot that's sort of loaded up with other items, particularly when it comes to the earnings tax. It's so essential.
I got you. All right. And on page 5, you're going to go over this with me a little bit. So there's a 6.2 million gap, And this is roughly how you filled it.
Yes,
Okay, so budget cuts about 1.3 million.
right.
Departments including portion of pay increases. So some departments absorbed the pay increases. Did fire and
No,
police?
that's, what we've found in the past is that most departments, particularly, let's talk about this year. We gave a 2% merit increase, and that's based on your anniversary date. So that overall, if its anniversary dates being uniformly distributed, it'd be about a 1% hit on their budget. Most departments were able to absorb that. We found that out a couple of years ago. Now, with police and fire, it's a little different, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to fill slots, and if it's not filled because you're a 24-hour operation, then you generate overtime costs. So when it comes to that, we said, okay, we got to budget those amounts. So they don't have that much flexibility there with their operations. So the police and fire do have the amounts budgeted in their budget for the pay increases.
Okay. There was, I think we saw some numbers following the unrest in August and September that the police had incurred, I think, almost $2 million in overtime.
Actually, more than that, but yes.
And that was just when we got that number, which was,
Right.
I think, in September.
Right.
And so there's probably additional. Do you know what that was, the additional, or the total amount incurred?
I can tell you that we have in the plan a supplemental appropriation to address this year's spending. Most of which, well, a good portion of which is associated with the police and fire responses to the civil disturbances. But there are also some, like for instance, the SALT I mentioned. The total supplemental appropriation we're preparing is $6.7 million. $5 million of that would be the police department. Not all of that is the civil disturbance related. I would say probably four, in the neighborhood of four maybe, between police and fire related to that. But but in addition to that, we've got the SALT we have to pay for that was about $1 million hit, as well as some of our equipment repair items. But that's a supplemental appropriation that's going to be, we need to conclude prior to the end of this fiscal year in order to make sure we finish this year's budget.
And that's going to come from the extra receipts you received?
Yeah, as I mentioned, this year's revenue is estimated at about $3 million over, but in this general revenue. But then we've got some of our special, the public safety sales tax, because as I mentioned, sales tax is outperforming this year. Again, that's one time, but we're utilizing those funds as well as some of the excess on the use tax side to bridge that sort of gap that developed this fiscal year.
So is there a surplus for this fiscal year?
I'm not projecting it now. It's sort of, it was a balancing act getting into this situation, because had we not had those issues in the early fiscal year, I would say we're looking pretty good. I could say, hey, look, we might have a $3 million balance at the end of the year. But I'm appropriating that $3 million balance for these funding issues. So it's sort of, I can't get more specific than that. Right now, I'm not projecting it.
So it sounds like, though, had it not been for the unrest, we might have about a $3 to $5 million surplus?
Yeah, maybe not 5, but in 3, I would say yes.
Okay. Revenue allocations.
Alderman, can we come back to you? You're over the 5-minute mark.
Okay.
Thank you. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Carter.
Yeah, with the agreement that Forest Park had for the utility costs, are they looking into another agreement, or are we just stuck with the $600,000 burden
No.
at this point for?
When we, if you remember, back when the budget and the recession were hardest, we were looking at trying to stem all the bleeding everywhere. And one of the reallocations we did was for parks capital at the time. And I think we did that 1 year. But because the Forest Parks funds were tied up in its debt service, well, most, at least the capital funds were tied up into its debt service, we said, look, we're doing this in all other areas. We need some way of having you also, I mean, we don't want to exempt you from this participation. And so the way we came up with that is you pay for your utilities. Well, that was about $600,000. and that came out of the Forest Park Fund. Well, obviously, as you know, we resumed full allocation for parks a number of years ago. That was only that 1 year I think we did it. But the 600,000 had been continuing for a number of years. When, at the time, they were working on the management agreement with Forest Park Forever and related to those revenues in terms of issuing bonds and other agreements to get the improvements in the parks, they acknowledged the fact that we were doing this, but they said, look, we would like to have an end date. And that end date was, I think they selected 3 years in advance that at the end of FY15, that will be it. And so that was the agreement that was entered into, and so that's why we're here today.
With the unrest in Ferguson, well, during that time, when we had the chief come, he spoke of another funding source to cover the cost of us sending officers out there. I think at the time it was $2 million, and he felt he was almost 100% sure that he was going to be reimbursed from. I see you laughing from another source. Did that ever come back up, or is?
I'm not aware of any other funding source.
Okay.
I remember some talk about, oh, well, the state's going to come in and assist or something.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it was something.
I am not aware of that at all.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Alderwoman Murphy.
None at this time.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Thank you. I got one question on page 17. With the dual fire retirement systems, so the new systems funded at kind of a low value, but that's just because it's new, and we'd expect that
Yeah, you would
with
expect
annual
that.
contributions,
Sure.
it'll rise.
Absolutely.
What's kind of the horizon on when you get to a point where it's funded at a level consistent with the other
Yeah,
retirement
I
programs?
would, that's a good question. I haven't looked at it in a bit. I would have to look at, I'd have to look at, the actuary, when they presented it, presents us with various scenarios and say, look, we understand you're a new fund, and it's going to take a while for it to get up to its funded status. I would hate to give a horizon without having the numbers in front of me, but it is typical for a new system such as that to sort of take a while to get back up to where it is. I should point out that actually that 34% is pretty good, since it's only the second year of operations.
Okay, thanks.
Alderman Moore, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Payne.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis. I can't see you, Madam Comptroller, but
Morning.
Morning. And if you could introduce the members of your staff first, so that we know who everybody is with you today. And then after you do that, just go over any significant changes in your budget. And if you want to say anything about the city as a whole, you've got the microphone.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you. First, we start off with John Sakai, who's my deputy controller, and I would like all the other controller office employees to stand, please. And we'll go around and introduce each one. Sergeant Judy.
Elaine Spearman, legal advisor and chief of staff. Good morning.
Money.
Thank you, guys. And again, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here to present our budget this morning. And we just start off real quickly with, did you want to pass out something too? Okay, well, we don't have anything to pass out. Normally we do. But we have a budget that, once again, is presented to you where we really scrutinize our numbers and come up with a reduction for fiscal 16. We are presenting a budget for fiscal 16 of a total of $7.3 million for the Comptroller's Office, with a total personnel of 92. And that's down from fiscal 15, which was 7.9 million budget, and personnel was 96. So we're down approximately 4.5 positions. And giving some highlights of why this budget has been able to go down, we are continually to be affected by the HUD reorganization, where we're looking at new strategies and our functions of the office regarding our internal audit department and other departments. And we were able to transfer some employees from the comptroller's office directly to the human services department, and that caused a reduction. And as we continue to review and reorganize with the new strategy, we will continue to seek savings where we can seek the savings. We also transferred a major expenditure out of the comptroller's office, which was the MSD bill for the city. The entire sewer bill for the city was always in the comptroller's office, and we moved that over to the facilities management area department, where their other utilities are being budgeted instead of the comptroller's office. That's your electric and other utilities. Any other highlights you want to bring up, John?
Well, the
Insurance.
transfer of the MSD of $980,000 that was in our budget, we had a 19.9% reduction. By removing that and only focusing on what was left after that transfer, we still had a 9% decrease in our budget. And $570,000 of this came from personal services line items, which include the cost of the salaries and all of the associated fringes that would go down with that. And that is a combination of losing 4.5 positions, plus we had some personnel who retired during the year, and we are replacing them with personnel that are new and they're at a lower salary. So that was the combination of that. We also had a major reduction in the insurance line item of $180,000, and that was due to favorable insurance condition. This is the insurance on the property insurance, and the insurance markets were better, and by going out to bid again, we saved $180,000 on insuring our buildings.
And that didn't happen without doing a study. We had a quote that was, we thought that was a little high, so we engaged a study, a consultant, and then we got back favorable numbers for the insurance. And that is...
The only thing I would add that the municipal garage and record retention are fairly flat. The municipal garage only went up 0.3%, and record retention actually had a decrease of 0.4. So most of the changes and the reductions that occurred in the 160 budget, which is the controller's office.
Administration of the controller's office. And so we're glad to say that we were able to come in with a large reduction in our overall budget this year because of those changes that we just described. And of course, I guess I can talk a little bit about the budget overall. I think that the budget department has done a very fine job, as you've just heard from the budget director. We continue to have a challenge when it comes to our expenditures and trying to meet that with our revenues, which, you know, we suffer from not having the flexibility that we need. And I do want to say a bit about the proposed GO. I think that in the past, you know, those who have been here understand that helps to fund the equipment for our firemen and for our police, and right now they're in dire need because we haven't done one of these bond issues to purchase those huge pieces of equipment that's needed for our first responders and our other uniforms. So we look at that, and what we are having now, instead of having those equipment on hand, the newer equipment, we have bills that are, I think it's about half a billion. Is it 500,000, Paul? Okay, well, these are repair bills we're talking about. So when you don't have, you know, the equipment that you need, then you have to continue to repair your old equipment. And so I just wanted to bring that up as a part of those dollars that could be on the street for delivery of services. Those are being used to repair equipment. And so those are the kind of things we got to look at when we talk about not having a bond issue. And we want to be supportive, and but we don't want to have taxpayers pay more for a bond issue in terms of the amount. And I think that amount is challenging for me. It could be a good $10 to $15 million less, and that's from our analysis in the Comptroller's office. And that's it. That's what we have.
All right. In this world of looking good, we didn't really have a savings citywide because you just moved the one expense for MSD out to a different department.
Overall, we had a total savings of a little under 8%, or a little around 8%, and that had to do with employees.
Right, and then on the employees,
Lower savings, lower
on the
salaries.
employees that we moved out, what job are they doing now over in HR?
They're doing,
Monitoring.
they're in human services, and they're doing fiscal monitoring.
What are they doing?
Fiscal monitoring, they go out to the sites and look at the financial,
So they're doing the same job that they were doing in the comptroller's office? Okay. So we didn't really have a savings there. And then the main savings in your office came from retirements and replacing them with lower?
Absolutely.
we have, so in addition to the,
And the insurance.
the three,
Now, the insurance is a good thing. I'll appreciate that.
in addition to the people who were transferred, there are also reductions in personnel in our office as well as the ones that were transferred.
Okay. Alderman Mort.
No question.
Alderman French.
Yeah, I have a question. Under the fund, the Convention and Tourism Fund, contractual and other services, first, could you describe to me the pass-through there for 5.5 million?
And that's to the, isn't that for the debt service?
Yeah.
Actually, that cost center is, the Controller's Office cost center is mostly used as a convenience for that item. But that's a revenue item. Those items are actually, if you look at your revenue book, that's a transfer from the 1 cent sales tax, or the 1 cent restaurant tax, which is the C&T fund's sources of revenues, into general revenue.
Okay, so I'll see that go into the general revenue. And the other two items also under there, the subsidy for the Sister Cities program, $75,000. Who does that go to? Who do we pay for?
That's the organization for sister cities, and in order to be in that, we have to pay.
And Sierra Leone is one of our sister cities, along with a couple more cities.
Stuttgart, Germany, Lyon, France,
France.
Gaulle, Lyon.
And in the past, we've had ceremonies that are held in the mayor's office regarding sister cities that we are sister cities with.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the Grand Center subsidy, we've talked about that before in this committee, and I think at that time, when we were looking at moving that money, we were told that that was going to subsidize the black rep.
Portion.
And then they got kicked out, and the money kept going. So where's the money going now?
A portion still goes to a black rep.
Even though they're not in Grand Center anymore?
That is correct.
But it's still listed under Grand Center subsidy?
Yes, because the deal, quote unquote, was made that we would increase the amount, as you can see, and then the black rep would benefit from $30,000 of that increase.
So they only get 30,000 of the 90?
That is correct.
So where does the other 60 go?
Grand Center.
Do we know what that goes for?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right, that's all I have right now. Thanks.
Alderman Vaccaro.
not really a question, but I called yesterday about wanting to find out if we got the fine paid from McKee as well as, okay,
We did not, if you would.
okay. So
This
the
is the
fine-
one-
different
the
fines did
one
not
that-
come in.
Okay, I'm sorry, what was that question, Alderman? I don't,
I had called yesterday, and I was curious, out of the concert deal and out of the McKee deal, has anybody paid their penalties? And actually, this, well, you can actually pass it on. So the concert people did pay one of their penalties so far. McKee hasn't paid any penalties so far. And that was just a question I had asked yesterday, and and you can pass it along. It's just a follow-up to, other than that, I have no real questions. But
And they do owe another. the
yeah, they owe another
concert
25
owed
plus.
Another one, and
Plus, I know that they
law
extended
department.
McKee's thing. Do you know when that's due again?
I do know we would have to check.
Okay. I had no other questions.
okay, Alderman Carter.
No question.
Alderwoman Murphy.
No, not at this time.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Since you brought up insurance and we're paying a lower premium, what buildings are we insuring under that?
We have a list of buildings that are insured, and I believe there are approximately 40 different buildings, and they're insured under a master policy that will cover all of the buildings. It includes all the downtown complex here, the
City
the,
Hall,
City
1520.
Hall, civil courts, the Carnahan Building, 1520 Market, includes the new rec centers. We can give you a list of all the buildings, if you would like, that are included in that policy.
Sure, that'd be great. And what's the total cost of the policy now?
It's $690,000, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
And just for everybody else here, so that's just property insurance?
Property.
Or is that's not liability? We're self-insured for the liability portion?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
We include
And a lot of those buildings are pledged under bond issues,
And required.
collateral, so we have to insure the building because they're used as collateral for a bond issue.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, and I
Yes,
just wanted to
go
add
ahead.
one more thing in terms of and I want to thank you for your question about those penalties for the concerts, because I wanted to just remind you guys, you can amend that ordinance at any time if you find that that organization is not meeting their required concert.
Well, tell us if they're not paying us the right amount.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You okay? The next, I'll tell you what, we'll take a 3-minute, is the mayor coming in? Okay. That's cool. Is the mayor coming? No. No? Okay.
We're not worthy of his presence.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman, members. I believe this is the simplest budget I've ever been before you to present. You know, coming from the street department is quite complicated. The budget is within the allocation. You know, it's 1.778 million. It's about a 2% reduction over last year. It has raises in it that everybody gets. The greatest change was this, moving this internal fund around from this internal service fund from 5653 to the 5647. You'll notice that in there, that $10,000. It's part of the transportation cost. We validate the parking, people that come to the mayor's office. We're still at 14 positions. When the mayor took charge of the office, we had 25. So we got a lot of busy beavers up there working, maintaining the 14. Since the mayor took office in 2001, The budget has grown approximately 25%, and the mayor's office budget has only grown by 12%. I think that's a pretty decent accomplishment. Are there any questions?
Okay. Generally, I would imagine that the committee members would have liked to hear from the mayor himself.
I apologize for that.
Okay. I guess I didn't know that he wasn't going to be here myself personally. Okay. Alderman Moore.
No question.
Alderman French.
So the mayor, is he here in the building?
I'm not sure where the mayor is right now.
Okay.
I am the operations director, so the budget does fall on my desk.
All right. Well, let's test you.
All right.
So the two police officers that are assigned to the mayor that drive him around, are they in his budget or in the police department's budget?
They're in the police department budget.
How much do they cost?
I do not know. I can find that out and get back to you.
Okay. Do you know what their rank is?
They're sergeants.
Okay. And how many does he have assigned to him?
2 is my understanding.
Do you know what they do besides drive him around?
I do not. I will talk to the chief and I can get that to you, Alderman French.
Okay. Of all the people in the mayor's office, are they all in his budget, or are some of them paid out of other funds? Like, for instance, his special assistants and deputies of this, deputies of that?
No, everybody that's in the mayor's office is in this budget. I'm not aware of other, employees that are like buried in other budgets or such. Not
So what about the former chief of staff who has represented himself as a consultant now for the mayor's office? What fund does he get paid out of?
You are talking about Jeff Rainford?
Yes.
He is not in the city budget anywhere.
So who pays him?
I am not sure. It is not a city expense. It is not in this budget that we're talking about here today.
So he's paid privately?
I do not know that. I can consult and I can get back to you.
Okay. That's all I have right now.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Carter.
Was the executive director for development moved to SLDC or somewhere else? Or was it just not filled?
It's not filled. I believe that was the old Barb Geisman that has left several years ago.
Does he plan on filling it soon or no?
No, as the budget reflects, it's not funded, so we're not looking at filling it this current year.
Okay. And I don't see Mrs. Wabi's position in it. Is it cut out or is it somewhere else? Or is it under?
I believe that she would be an executive assistant to the mayor.
Okay.
And there's positions there, and she is no longer an employee.
Oh.
You understand, she left about a month ago.
Oh, okay.
She retired.
Didn't know.
Yeah.
She works per performance then, or?
Pardon me?
No, she works for the state.
She works for the state.
Yeah, she
Yeah, I thought I
got a
read
job
that
with the
somewhere.
state of Missouri.
Thank you. No further questions.
Alderwoman Murphy. Alderman Ogilvy.
What happened to the 3-minute break? I missed the whole presentation.
You know, I thought we were because we had to chase down somebody, but we're not chasing them down.
I guess I don't have any
We're on
questions.
page 5. I'm sorry, page 3. The mayor's budget, mayor's office budget.
Annual operation plan picture.
I have one more question.
Okay.
And it's,
Okay, there's no questions down there, Alderman?
Well, I'll ask, I mean, this is more of a general question or comment is that,
We only do questions.
okay, do you guys have enough people in the mayor's office? I sense that between the Board of Aldermen and the mayor's office, frequently we're lacking staff, is my belief.
Well, I believe we're managing, okay? I believe we're getting the job done. I think that's the essential part, that's the measure. I think things are happening and it's going and it's doing. If there's some weakness that you may see, we can discuss that. So, no, I think we are adequately staffed.
Okay.
Alderman Carter.
As far as lobbying, is this still the contract for Rodney Boyd, or is this both Rodney and other lobbyists?
That is currently the Rodney Boyd contract.
Oh, one more question, sir.
Alderman French.
So a couple of things I've seen that have kind of increased here. Transportation, the transportation budget from 2013 expended was actually zero. Expended in 2014 was around $1,500, and this year is budgeted $10,000. So it increased from 0 to 10,000. And then I also see so that's transportation. Then there's also a travel budget, which is 5,000. So what's the difference between travel and transportation, and why do you need that much?
So the transportation number went up as it came from the internal service fund. You'll see that was 10,000 last year, and now it went to 1,500. So that money is being used to pay for the parking to the treasurer. So people that visit the mayor's office come in and they get their parking validated. And we actually started looking at it a little better. I think we were being abused a little bit. People were getting stamped and hanging around all day. So now we're putting a specific time on it so we can cut out some of that. We're hoping that will go down.
Okay, that's trans.
That's that expense. The 5,000 for travel was put in there in case we need it. The mayor does not, support, it's very little travel. We do not have anything planned for that travel, but we wanted it there in case we needed it. Most of his travel is paid for outside the city budget with campaign money as such. So we do not use travel money very much. It's just a safety net, if you would.
Okay, and likewise with the funds for the elected officials' expense accounts, is that just 30,000 that's been moved down to the mayor's contingent fund?
Correct. The mayor wanted to make sure everybody understood that was his money to do it, and there's no monkey business with it. So in other words, before it was in the elected officials' expense account, and that's not very clear. So this is the mayor's money to do as he see fit, and I believe it's laid out in an ordinance to give him those funds. So his salary set and then that funding set in a separate ordinance.
So that goes towards his salary?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, I heard the question, but the answer was yes. What was the question again, Alderman?
The question was, is that $30,000 just goes towards his salary?
Yes,
Not to his personal salary?
yes, it can.
Okay, but does it, or we don't know yet?
Yes, it does.
Okay. That's fine. I just want to make sure I heard what I heard. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Just my years. Mr. President, you're up. You notice we're running 3 minutes ahead of schedule.
Just made that comment over there that you guys are ahead of schedule. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I have with me today Thomas Shepard, who worked in conjunction with our clerk, David Sweeney, in putting together the Board of Aldermen's budget. So with your indulgence, I'd just like to let Tom proceed, walk us through it. It is a very simple budget, not much change from year to year.
And Tom, let's use the microphone. My ears must be clogged.
Okay.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay.
Ms. McNichols is handing out just a little one sheet are just showing on some of the non-salary accounts what the differences are between the FY16 and the FY15 budget. As you can see, not much has changed. Salaries increased due to citywide merit increases, and the line item under materials and supplies, office and computer, is down from last year. That number rotates up and down every year based off of the composite photograph that we do for the board and Good Neighbor Guides, the printing of the Good Neighbor Guides. Other than that, at office and computer, that line item is up $5,000 from last year. We do have some computer needs. I mean, I don't know if your secretaries have expressed anything to you, but I know my desktop is probably 8 years old. It's moves very slow. I do a lot of work on my laptop that I bring with me.
What brand is it?
What brand are we using? I believe it's Dell.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's pretty, if we ever replace them, that's the brand I would get. 8 years is a nice long time.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but it's not.
I'm teasing.
So that's the budget that's being presented. Now, there has been, a lot of discussion amongst members of the board, just, how lacking in resources the Board of Aldermen is. Other departments, the legislative branch, I guess I'll say the comptroller's office or the financial branch is really, I guess they're all part of the administrative branch. But they're able to, the mayor's office, comptroller's office, they're able to contract outside legal counsel, outside financial experts. There was a time that the Board of Aldermen had as full-time positions legislative researcher and an assistant to that legislative researcher and a financial analyst. There's been some board bills that have been some development deals and board bills that have been presented to the Board of Aldermen where we've made the decision without all the information that we would have liked to have had. It would be nice to have somebody, here that is, their position is that they would look into that kind of information, ask those kind of questions, and make sure the board is prepared to make a decision with all the accurate information that's needed. We also put a little extra workload on our secretaries a few years back. We eliminated a secretary position. We never filled that position, and we finally took it out the budget eventually. But their workload increased with no kind of a commensurate increase in pay. Yes, the legal counsel and the clerk position. We also merged that into one position as well. So we've, again, lost a lot of human capital here at the board over the years, and I think, it's time that we start looking at replacing some of that because it's going to be necessary in the years going forward with some of the decisions that we have to make here at the board, that we have all the information that we need and all the support staff that we need in order to make the best decision. I'll take any questions.
All right. Mr. President, just a couple of things. You think that you can draft up something so that we could get at least look at a proposal to have contract service?
Okay.
Maybe $45,000 worth of a lawyer a year and $45,000 of a, financial analysis type of individual. I would assume that financial analysis would be responding to the Ways and Means Committee. I don't care if the lawyer responds to.
No, I think you're exactly right. The financial analysis person would respond to the Ways and Means Committee. and to any direct responses that the board may have.
And are there any bills coming up, that in the immediate foreseeable future where, like a Ballpark Village type of bill or something coming up that we need to look at a different level?
I think absolutely yes. I know that there's a move, they're looking at, outsourcing some of the water department to MSD. The Paul McKee stuff continues to evolve. We have the Rams football stadium. That deal's going to be coming.
Now, get that worked up, please. All right, let's move on. Alderman Moore.
No question.
Alderman French.
Yeah, so I'll just offer my 2 cents, is that, an Office of Legislative Research is already, is supposed to be in our budget somewhere. We don't fund it. And it really makes us very dependent on the executive branch for information. So I would really think that it would be a good investment on our part. I'm introducing a piece of legislation this week to require fiscal notes on bills.
Okay.
For that very reason, because we have been given some false information in the past. In many cases, before we started recording these meetings, sometimes the information was just given and then denied later that they gave it to us. So yeah, we should start really examining the cost of these bills that we pass, because sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we regret what we did some years later.
Absolutely.
And as far as staffing, I know it's not going to happen, but I think we always, as a board, we always short ourselves. We don't give ourselves enough staff to be as effective as we could be. We split our secretaries so much to the point where we each only get maybe a quarter or a third of a secretary.
Yeah.
And we can't really serve our constituents as best we could. Maybe that will change once we cut the number of aldermen in half.
No.
Maybe we will get full-time staff for each.
Yeah, not with the current proposal. It doesn't look like that'll happen, because if you cut the Board of Aldermen in half and then you double their salaries, there are no cost savings for it. You'll be in the same situation.
Well, the proposal
worse.
for double their salaries isn't proposed yet either.
Yeah, but
So as we revamp this whole thing, I hope there is a salary increase for those poor saps that are
That are left.
that are stuck with double the population.
Yeah, thank you.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Carter.
Just to echo some of the stuff that Alderman French said, I think that it is essential that we have some
We
type
need questions, Alderman.
of...
Pose it in a question, or we got?
No questions.
All right. Alderwoman Murphy.
Jeopardy.
Mr. Chairman, that's why you,
Well,
that's
then
why,
ask that question.
Mr.
Question is,
Chairman, that's why you're running early.
Who is the aide or sergeant at arms? Is that Dave too?
The sergeant at arms is
Terrence Moore.
Terrence is
okay.
the sergeant at arms, and the web development person, and a number of other things. Yeah.
Alderman Murphy. Alderman Ogilvy.
In the form of a question, why do we not, why do we not just create the line items for the Office of Legislative Research? It's in our code
Yeah.
that it shall exist.
Yeah.
I suppose even if those positions are not filled, it seems to me the first step to getting them filled is to, have them as a request in the budget. So why are those not part of our request?
We, just because historically we have not put them in there, but yes, I think we should. That's what this committee has the power to do in changing the budget, moving it forward, and then when we take it up at the Board of E&A, we'll make sure to codify that.
I just think, to have something approaching equal branches of government, the Board of Aldermen is dramatically under-professionally staffed, in my opinion, and it's a disservice to citizens. So I think we need those positions filled.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Well noted.
Did you have something to add, Mr. President?
No, thanks for all the comments and the time, and thanks for all the work that you all are doing on this committee. It's a really important committee because it's going to set the stage of what happens in our city across the next year. Mr. Chairman, also thanks for the points, so we will go back and work on the 2 points that you requested.
And I'm flexible on the amount. Will we see you Thursday evening at the Carpenter Branch Library
Yes.
for the public meeting?
Yes.
All right. And did you want to answer questions then?
No,
From the public?
I'm fly on the wall. I'm
Okay,
just
now
coming
come
to
sit
watch.
up with us. All right.
Watch you guys. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our meeting today. It is 7 minutes to 10. Thank you. Okay. We're moving. Okay. I'm going to leave you these blank sheets so we can. You. Okay.